So the topic today, we are talking about struggles of being single. So what happens when you are single? Ni struggle gani zenye unapitianga? One of the struggles ni ati haunanga mse wa open up to. So most of the times you find that either unaweza kunapitia kitu and you don't have someone to open up to. What does this mean? Inamaanisha that anytime probably you're going through a challenge, you go through a frustration, or even when you are celebrating, ile time when unataka kushare achievement yako na mtu, unapata really apart from your friends you can't share it with somebody probably that you are so close to, right? Because you're not dating, you're not in a relationship. So being single inakuja na ako ka ka isolation flani na feel enyewe hauna mse wa kushare na yeye. So that's one of the biggest struggles. Another struggle ni that you don't have a support, you might lack a support system, okay? Because you see the support you're getting from your friends na support enye unaweza pata na mtu mko kwa relationship na yeye, those are two different kind of support, okay? Because your friends, obviously tunafikanga hiyo point where we see our friends as almost the ordinary thing that happens in your life, okay? Like hauoni ikiwa anything out of the norm. But when it's somebody that you really love supporting you, una feeling like wow, you can be able to achieve anything just because una feel uko na hiyo support ya somebody that you're in a relationship with. So that's another struggle that you get to that point where you realize enyewe I just wish that ningekuwa na mtu enyewe hata yeye aweze kuwa anakuwa able kunipe hiyo support, okay? So you might lack a support system, especially if you are an introvert. Kumbuka, you can be single and you are an introvert, meaning you don't have friends, you don't know how to make friends. Ama you can be antisocial and you are single. So meaning hata haujui kuongelesha watu, ama you find it uncomfortable talking to people, or you don't have the skills to talk to people, which you should learn, but because of that antisocialness unapata sasa hauna support system. Another thing could also be you don't have companionship, hauna mse mwenye mnaongeanga tu mnachapa story. You see, being in a relationship is much more than having intimacy with somebody. There are people who are like they think going into a relationship is about the material things. Unapata mtu expectations zake, maybe anataka kuingia relationship because atakupelekwa date. But you see, when you are single, you remember that by the way, and it's not about the dates. Dates unaweza jipeleka hata kani place utaenda ukunywe soda ya 100, but umejipeleka we mwenyewe. So you can call it a date, but you see the struggle of being single is actually that companionship. You lack that person mwenye mnaweza chapa story na yeye, akwambie life yake kunaendeleaje, mnacheka na yeye, you get like ile genuinely, okay? Another struggle of being single is obviously you will miss out on intimacy. Now that's the big part, but that's one of those parts, okay? Like you miss out on it because sasa utanini na nani, okay? Because it's you alone. And especially I think even for the ladies, because you see madem sana sika wanaume ati a guy can be single and still intimacy engagement yake iko so high, you see. But for a lady, before I engage in that intimacy, especially for some ladies wenye principles zao ni zile za we cannot engage in intimacy if we are not in a relationship. So ukishasikia dem amesema hivyo, it means for them they stay longer before experiencing any kind of intimacy, okay? Unless sasa yeye mwenyewe a give in. So that's one of the other things. Itakuwa a struggle because of course nani hataki kukuwa na mse mwenye ana feel you feel good around them, okay? And I told you what I came to understand about intimacy, it's not always about the physical thing that you are doing. Inaweza kuwa pia your love. Unajua pia kufeel umeamka asubuhi umelove mse, okay? That's the thing that I'm calling intimacy. Hiyo kufeel tu you are attracted ama umevutwa kwa mtu ama you feel that connection with somebody, that's also intimacy, all right? Another thing also you need to know that another struggle of intimacy ni ati most of the times you don't have anyone to communicate with, especially kama wewe ni mtu unapenda kuongea, you love to have conversations. Unapata some of the times that hata unatafuta watu random tu pigie simu, ufeel hiyo kitu imekutoka because you're not having conversations with anyone. Maybe kwa chat list yako hata hakuna mtu na chat na yeye. So you see it becomes a struggle. So because you don't have anyone to communicate to, you literally have gotten to that point where unamkanga asubuhi hata hakuna ka good morning message, hakuna ka hey, hakuna mtu anaendeleza conversation ya jana, simply because you are not talking to anyone. So it can be a struggle. Inaweza kuwa struggle kubwa sana. The other disadvantage about being single, ama the other struggle about being single, unapatanga like you get to that point where you can be lonely. Unajua unaweza kuwa lonely because you're not talking to anyone, you're not calling anyone, you're not speaking ama you're not meeting anyone. So uko tu hapo, and especially wale wase wenye you really take time to be able to meet somebody. Kama we ni ule mse mwenye you are single, but it's almost like wiki haishangi kama hauna namba mpya, wiki haishangi kama hujajuana na mtu mpya. For you probably singlehood, and that's me right now. For me singlehood haikwangi that bad because at least I can be able to create friendship haraka haraka. Naweza juana na dem haraka haraka. I meet a lady, I say hi, I take their number. I go on social media, pale DM, I take their number. And there's nothing wrong with that because at the end of the day sometimes hata kuongelesha mtu, sometimes you feel refreshed. Una feelingi wow, nimetoa ka pressure fulani nilikuwa nako just by talking to someone. And for me especially nimekam kuona calls by them most of the times. Calls inakuanga kitu poa sana where you just talk about random conversations and you're just moving from one topic to the other. Sometimes I feel like it's so good because once you get to that point you una appreciate by the way that even talking to somebody anaweza kumake tu feel poa, especially kama umeongea mkacheka, you kind of feel good. So that loneliness haiwezi kupata sana, haiwezi kuaffect sana. Another thing that happens when you are not when you are single ama struggle nyingine ya kuwa single, you find that because you are not in a relationship you don't have anyone to open up to. Okay, so hata kama uko na zile deep things you feel like you want to share and you don't want to share with your friends, you see the people who we date ama wale wase tunaingianga nao kwa relationship, they carry so many of our secrets, some things zenye hata hatuwezi ambia mabeshte wetu. But you find kama ni mse mko in a relationship na yeye utajipata tu ukimwambia. Why? Because you want that person to open up to. Unatakanga tu mse wa ku open up to. So sometimes when you are single you lack that person because maybe you don't want to tell your friends, hutaki kuambia just any random person. Okay, it's crazy. Another struggle ya kuwa single ni you get to that point where you realize by the way that lazima ujitume sana. So now this is for the men and I think even for the ladies because sasa uko single, hakuna mtu anakuongelesha, hakuna mtu hakuna mtu mnaongea na yeye, and then it gets to a point where you start to feel desperate. Unaanza kufeel ai manzi hapana, I need kutafuta mtu wa kuongelesha. So sometimes that's when you find that even a lady anaweza anza kukuongelesha out of the blues. Maybe alikuwa na namba yako kitambo akadelete ama ukadelete, and then now she starts to look for you. Why? Because maybe amefika point kwa maisha yake she's so single hadi ana feel manze kwani wanaume waliachanga kuniongelesha. Okay, and also it can happen for the men. Inafika point una realize now lazima ujitume because sasa usipojituma ka loneliness ndiko wako kanaanza kucreep in. Usipojituma una feel like manze kwani unaanza kukua isolated na hujui. So you start it's almost like you start living like an island. Na nasikia wanasemanga no man is an island. So meaning you are not meant to always be alone. Hata uongeleshangi mtu, we kazi yako tu ni social media. Okay, at least siku hizi kuna vitu kama TikTok live shows where you can interact with another person. Okay, and I find even in my live shows ushapata tu mtu amekuja na story mingi, una realize this person maybe they are very closed off hadi hananga mtu wa kuongelesha. So anytime they find somebody ako live, they want to go live with you, they want to have conversation with you, and you can easily find that probably huyo mse hana mse wa kuongelesha. Like when they wakipoesha hiyo live show, they don't have anyone to text, they don't have anyone to call. Maybe probably juu ameringia au ama maybe probably you never know. Sometimes you never know. And I think the last point nitasema, another struggle of being single is when you get to that point and you realize, by the way, kwani insecurity starts to creep in. Uko like, by the na kwa nini watu hawaniongeleshangi? Okay, by the kwa nini nakuanga single? Sasa unaanza kumiss relationship, especially if you have been in a relationship where the relationship was working. Unaanzanga kumiss relationship zako, unaanza kusema sasa hapo ni unapatanga wasi wana reconnect na ma ex. Kwa nini? Because they were in a relationship and now they are not in a relationship, now they are single, but una feel tu huo mse anataka tu ku connect na mse waliwahi connect. That's why you find some people are still talking to their exes. Why? Because at least hapo kulikuwa na ka foundation ka relationship, and now that they are single they don't have that ka foundation. Sasa anashinanga amerudia ex, anashinanga tu amerudia ex, anashinanga tu amerudia ex, which is a very toxic trait, and it's not something me as I encourage, because at the end of the day mkimalizana na ex, please malizeni. Okay, malizaneni. And I will say the last thing, I'll say this, comment hapo kwa comment section and tell me what is the struggle that you think ukiwa single unapitianga wewe peke yako? Like ni struggle gani una feeling, hey manze, this is the one thing that you don't like about being single?
Gachin Lion